great-granddad had the store here at Pino Blanco. They slept in the back part of the store. It was probably just a very rough building, so one night, in the middle of the night, there was knocking on the back door. My grandpa got up and went to the door. Here was about 3 Mexican fellas standing there telling him they wanted to get some supplies. He said, well, come in the daytime. He said, no, we'd like to come at night. We'll pay you extra. So he let them in. They got the supplies they wanted. They walked back outside, and the leader of it whistled. And some other Mexicans with pack animals came and picked him up, and away they went. Well, this happened infrequently, but for several years, and he finally put 2 and 2 together, and when this gang of Mexicans came to the store, it was about the time Murieta was robbing around in this area. So it didn't take long for him to figure out that that was Joaquin Murieta. So the next time he came in the middle of the night, my granddad asked him, he says, you are Joaquin Murieta. And Murieta says, Georgia. He called my granddad Georgia. Georgia, he says, you've been safe. Nobody's bothered you, have they? No. And they never will, as long as you don't go tell people that we're coming here at night. So Grandpa says, no, I'll never tell anybody. So they had a working agreement. The Haigh family was safe, and Murieta got his supplies through Grandpa. And when they broke the gang up down at Calinga at 3 Rocks, where they were at that time, and the militia caught him down there, they didn't get Murieta, and it was not his head in that pickled bottle, because they had it on display up through here, and people that had known him before he went bad laughed and said, no, that wasn't Murieta, because Murieta had very fine features. He was a lot of Spanish blood, and it came out in his features, and the head in the pickled jar was definitely 100% Mexican, which was not Murieta. So it passed around the country, and the ones that knew Murieta just laughed about that being his head, so he did not get killed down 3 Rocks.
Okay.
So the next story goes that many years after, I don't know exactly how many, I've never tried to calculate it, that there was a Mexican woman showed up here at the Haighs with a pack animal and a teenage son, and she asked if there was a place she could stay. George Bell Haigh could talk Spanish very good with dealing with the Mexican miners and all, so he could communicate with her, and she wanted to know if there was a place she could camp. So he took her down here to a spring, about a quarter of a mile from the house, and it was pasture land. Of course, there wasn't fences everywhere at that time. So she camped there and got pretty friendly with our family, and they would have her and her son up here for dinner quite often. And after a month of every day, she would go out riding, her and her son, come back to the camp, sometimes come here, and finally she told my grandparents that she had to go back to Mexico because what she had done here, she couldn't get done. So he started questioning her, and this is the story that she told my great-grandfather, that one of Murieta's gang was her husband, and he got shot up down at 3 Rocks and made it back to Mexico and had infections from the wounds and all. And she doctored him and tried to get him over it, and got doctors at that time to help. Well, they weren't poor, because he would take loot down there when they would gather up enough up here that they'd take it down to Mexico to their families. So she told Grandpa that her husband had told her that they had buried the loot they'd gathered up here in Dutch ovens, and told her where it was, and drew her a little map of where it was, and they'd been trying to find it. Well, she didn't know the map to my great-grandfather, George Haigh, and he looked at it. Well, he recognized features that she would never know because it was, you know, local people calling things Marsh's Flat and Pino Blanco Point and the different creeks and all. So he looked at it and he memorized where this stuff was supposed to have been buried. And so when she headed back to Mexico, my great-grandfather took a couple of his sons and they went out to the spot, and it is passed down through the generations of us. We know where it is. My great-grandfather was going to open it up. He never did. My grandfather, Johnny Haigh, was always going to go and find it. He never did. My dad's generation came along, and he and his brothers and cousins were always going to uncover it. They never did. Then it comes down to my generation. And I have been out there, and it would take a bulldozer or a pretty heavy piece of equipment to uncover where all this has caved in over the spot. But I feel as though there's nothing fabricated about that story. It came from great-grandpa to my grandfather that lived up to 1950 and told us the stories that was passed to him and passed to us. And so the Merced newspaper got wind of this one time and came up, and I've got copies around here of the article that they wrote and pictures they took of my family and the story. But anyway, there's supposed to be 3 Dutch ovens with their loot buried out there. It looks like I'm going to have to turn it over to my kids now to uncover it. It's not exactly accessible, and you would be able to see the area if we started working out there from a couple of places on 49 Highway. But a very interesting thing happened for one of our Joaquin Murieta days. So, my dad showed me where this supposedly treasure was buried, and I've been out to the spot, and it's very rugged country out there. And the description was from the Mexican woman, from her husband, that they could sit at this spot and watch all of Moccasin Creek and see the mining going on and tell where the good gold was being found. And they primarily liked to rob the Chinese. And so they would go rob the sluice boxes and get their money and get back to their hideout. Well, the description that the Mexican told his wife was they had one place they could stay in the daytime and watch where the good gold was being found, and it matches exactly. Not far in back of it, there was horse pasture and a good spring, and that all is the way it is. And anyway, when my great-granddad got out there, he found signs that shouldn't have been there, like broken wine bottles. There was a big, long-shaped Mexican spur that was on the ranch for years. Well, a lot has changed in all those years. This is the 3rd house on this spot, for one thing. And so we know that this tale is true, because it came from great-grandpa to my grandfather. And I was 20 years old when he passed, and he told us all the stories. My Aunt Doll lived to 102. She was born and raised here, went through grammar school here. There was a school here from the time it was a mining camp. And her graduation certificate from the Pino Blanco school is in the museum at Coulterville now. So the tale came through all the family, and we know it. So we shared it with many others, and the newspapers wrote several articles on it, and a magazine picked it up one time and wrote it up. We've got copies of it. I gotta get that organized and out to where I can get a hold of it when I need to. So that was the story of the Mexican woman in my.
And you're not telling anybody where this is at.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, I started to tell you that one of our Joaquin Murieta Day celebrations, they supposedly had family from Joaquin Murieta going to be there, and they were. And one of the members of the family was a mentally disabled girl, and they had her doctored up in Mexican clothes, and the whole family came to the Joaquin Murieta Days. So when that moved to the park in Coulterville, I went up to him and introduced myself and told him this story. And boy, were they interested, because one of the nephews of Murieta was doing a biography on him, doing a movie the family was putting out of the true story of Murieta and his life, not tales circulating around the country. So I brought them out to the ranch, showed them where the store was, told them this complete story, and I'm still in contact with them, and they moved to Texas from the San Jose area. Well, they tell me that Joaquin Murieta came back to California after the gang was broke up and all, and he lived his life down by Sonora and died and buried down there. And I fully believe that. And this would be part of that story that they were doing the movie on. A funny segment of that to me was this fact, that teenage girl that was very mentally challenged, they had all costumed up with Mexican gear and all. A very sweet girl, and everybody that knew her loved her. Anyway, I got a call from the Murrietas one day that this girl had passed away, and they wanted to move her body back to Texas where they were going. But the funeral homes told them the expense was going to be moving it to an airport, getting the body moved on an airliner back to Texas was just going to be way beyond what they could pay for it. So she asked me, do you think it's possible we could get a U-Haul trailer and to haul her body back to Texas in the coffin? And I said, well, I don't see why not. Well, I told them some of the ins and outs that I thought about it, and later, this is what they did. They rented a U-Haul trailer, put the coffin in the trailer, and headed to Texas with her. But anyway, she asked me, she said, what, like we're going over the grapevine, it's just horrifying to think of the trailer breaking loose and going down the highway. I said, it would be bad, it wouldn't be good. And I got picturing that in my mind, the poor people that captures this runaway trailer with a coffin in it. But anyway, they did. They moved the body back to Texas. It was a success. And the girl got buried back there. But that family, I still try to keep in contact with as much as I can. I've been so darn busy, but I've ignored them more than I should. But that's just a highlight of the Murieta family. And they still go by the name of Murieta.